What's a secret that you'll never tell your spouse? Story 1. One time I left my younger daughter, middle child, in a hot car and forgot she was there. My wife and my oldest daughter had gotten out and went into a theater where the oldest daughter had her dance recital. I parked the car about 100 feet away, and for some reason, maybe because my wife and daughter got out, my stupid brain just decided to go into kid-free mode. To say I panicked 10 minutes later when I remembered would be an understatement. I was in mid-conversation with someone when I remembered her, and I just turned and ran. No explanation. I sprinted to the car, but knowing it was only 10 minutes, I knew it would be okay. There she was, a little sweaty, but just sitting there and looking around. Smiled when she saw me. The memory haunts me. I frequently lose sleep or have to pull my mind off it. The thought of what would have happened and how easy it was to forget her will never leave me. Always double check for your kids, folks, even if you think you're good or have a great memory. I'm not a parent, but one of my good friends told me that after she had kids, anytime she got in the car, she would take off her shoe and put it in the back seat. She obviously wouldn't walk into wherever she was going with one shoe on, so it forced her to turn around to the back seat to grab it every time that she drove. Kids in a car seat or not. I always remembered that and thought if I was ever a parent, that's probably something I should do. I've done this. I had dropped my oldest with her dad and had my youngest, who was probably 2 months old at the time. My friend and I went to the Walmart to get yarn. We were walking around the store when I looked in the mirror saying something about my boobs and breastfeeding to my friend, and it was at that moment I realized we forgot my son in the car. I ran out of the store and back to my car, and there he was, sleeping in his car seat. I was only gone for maybe 10 minutes, and it was winter. I remember feeling horrible about it for a long time, but it has never happened again. It's crazy how easy it is to forget an entire child in a hot car. Story 2. Sometimes I stay 10 to 15 minutes in the car before coming up to the house. Not ashamed of it or something, but I like some time to be private and not judged. Addendum. It's mostly so that I don't bring the stress from outside into our home. Not good to bring negative energy or emotions when facing your kid at home. My wife, when she was my girlfriend, used to do this when we first moved in together. We hadn't been together that long, and we were both a little mistrusting and had a few other issues at the time. I remember getting so mad watching her in the car for sometimes 30 minutes. Sometimes I'd hear her on the phone. I'd get so upset and could call her out on it time and time again. Until one day, she told me it was the only time she had between work obligations and home obligations, where she just took a beating and did not owe anyone anything. Sometimes she would call her mom, who she hasn't been able to see for years, to chat. And it's true. There was always so much going on and so much to do. I never bothered her again about it. She still does it from time to time. The lesson here is that communication will make it so much easier to give your partner some grace where they need it the most. My father used to bring his work home with him all the time, meaning that whatever made him upset at work, he would take out on me and my sister. His anger would lead to yelling and degrading us. I promised myself I would never do that to my family. One time, I was pissed off from work, fuming the whole way home. I got inside the house and immediately I let something set me off and I yelled at my wife and toddler child. I don't even remember what it was, but they didn't deserve that at all. I walked away angry and fuming at them. After about 2 minutes of sitting down by myself, I realized that I did what my dad used to do, and I promised myself I'd never do. That was the first and last time I did that. Somehow, every day at that time clock from that day forward, when I hit the clock out button, I feel as if I blacked out for 8 hours and none of it mattered. I've somehow learned to compartmentalize my work life and never bring it home with me. The one downside is whenever my wife or kids ask me how work was, I instinctively say, same stuff, different day, because I'd honestly have to put forth effort to remember anything that happened while at work. This shouldn't be much of a secret in the first place. Story 3. I sleep better alone than with her. She loves sleeping together. Although I haven't told her, I believe she suspects it because she has been making suggestions such as sleeping more at my place. We don't live together at the moment. Usually we pick up 2 single-person mattresses, don't know the exact term for it in English, and push them together on the floor. We have separate blankets. I'm really sensitive to heat and hardly feel cold, whereas here it's the opposite. She feels cold frequently, sometimes even when I'm hot, so compromising a room temperature, it's often complicated, especially since she sleeps poorly when I turn the fan on. I believe my problem resides in 1. Sleeping in a different place, even if it's my room, it's on the floor, it's different, and 2. Temperature. If it's cold, usually it's better, but when it's hot, it gets rough. Either I get bad sleep due to heat, or she gets bad sleep due to the fan being turned on. This is the one. I can get to sleep in 10 minutes on my own terms. Under my girlfriend's terms, I basically have insomnia. I can probably recite word for word Bob's Burgers, That 70s Show, The Office, and a couple of other shows first season, LMAO. I told her we were sleeping with the TV muted one night and got mad and said, "You didn't even try to compromise with me, WTF?" I'm like, dude, I stay up every single night with this stuff. Give me one night to sleep peacefully under my own terms. My husband and I made the mutual decision to sleep separately. He snores a lot. I think he has sleep apnea, but he refuses to get tested and get a CPAP machine. So what happens is I constantly tell him throughout the night to stop. Earplugs don't work. It got to a point where both of us were tired and cranky and we were fighting all the time. We've finally separated our sleeping beds and it's like we never had that rough patch. I still think he should get a CPAP machine because I know sleep apnea is deadly, but he comes from a family that rarely goes to the doctor, and I can only do so much. But at least we can be a married couple again. Just wait until you have kids, then you'll not sleep alone for years. Story 4. Every paycheck, I take out $25 to $30 in small bills and slip some bills into her pockets while I'm folding laundry. Money is tight, and it's the source of a lot of anxiety for her. So to see how excited/relieved she gets when she finds it makes me happy. I do similar things. I earn more, but she refuses to do a reasonable split on the bills and wants 50-50, even though 50% of the bills is 80% of her income and 50% of the bills is only 25% of mine. So every week when she tops up the gas, I secretly add £5 on between her top-ups, so she thinks we are using less. Same with tobacco. I buy an extra pouch and keep filtering handfuls into her bag. We do a strict food budget, but after work I top up some things I know she dreads running out of, like washing tablets and sponges. She either knows, or just thinks we have somehow started using less of everything. I also put loose change in her purse. Not much, like £2 or £3 every day, and she gets really happy to find it. She also has money tins that you can't open, where she saves for things. I'm pretty sure over 50% of the money in it is what I've put in. That reminds me, I used to hide a $20 bill in various places of hers. Behind the cell phone in the case was my favorite. I frequently had to rush somewhere to help her due to her forgetting her wallet and not having food for the day, not being able to get gas, etc., etc. I saved the phone case money for an emergency, and one day I got a call from her 2 hours away and was able to save myself a lot of driving by telling her to open her phone case, LOL. That's one of the sweetest things I've heard. Story 5. Early on in our relationship, I made breakfast for my then girlfriend and her kids using some pancake mix that she had in the pantry. After making the pancakes and serving them, I went to mix up a little more to make mine, and I realized there were some maggots in the dry mix. They were pretty much done eating and telling me how good they were. I decided that ignorance was better than telling them, taking that one to my grave. This happened to me last year after serving my kids hot dogs. Went to make my husband's hot dogs and saw something moving in the bun. There were multiple, 3 to 4 maggots or worms, or whatever on his bun. He saw it too, and we both exchanged this horrified look, but the kids had already scarfed theirs down. The buns weren't even expired or anything. I'll never ever tell another soul, and I check every piece of bread very thoroughly now. Similar horror story with food. I was drinking a bottle of wine. I was drinking it straight out of the bottle because it was my own personal bottle, and I was just kind of sipping on it while I would cook. And that went on for a couple of weeks. I'm cooking and take a few sips from the wine bottle while I'm cooking, kind of like chilling at the end of the day. Anyway, after a week or two, I finally finished the bottle and I noticed something is at the bottom. And I looked, and there were a bunch of dead flies. I don't know how they got in there. I guess there was a crack in the cork or something, so they were able to get in the bottle, and then they died in there. So I was drinking a bunch of dead bug juice. I guess it can have bacteria, or it can just be gross. But then again, if no harm has been done, then it's probably not as gross as we think it is. It was probably some extra protein. Story 6. That I chipped our wonderful granite quartz counter that he picked out and filled it with white putty. I will take this to my grave. They don't feel bad at all. I worked for a granite company for 6 months, and we used to get calls from customers with chips basically any time they could feel texture, and we would come fill in the cracks with a special glue that's like what dentists use with the UV light. This is awesome. I've done a couple of kitchen renovations for my spouse and inevitably make a permanent screw-up or two. I tell my spouse that they exist, but don't tell them what they are. In the last reno, I lightly scratched a tile and drilled a cupboard handle a bit too low. They found the scratch a year later. The hole in the cupboard I filled with a matching color silicone. The handle hides the hole. The only way to see it is to look up from underneath the handle. They never found that one. I mean, most quartz countertops come with a warranty that they will fulfill for chips. They would just have to send a person out to fix it. Story 7. That I left the Nintendo Switch you gifted me on a bus. The Switch that you see me using is a replacement that I bought on eBay. This happened to me with one of our stuffed animals. I love plushies, and he gifted me an orange dino from Target. I brought it on vacation to the Grand Canyon because I wanted to take pictures of it at the park. As soon as I got back to my hotel room, I realized that I couldn't find my dino, named Sedona by the way, for the Red Rocks. I realized I must have left it on the train. As soon as I flew home, I made sure to run to Target and get myself a new one because I knew he'd be heartbroken if I told him I lost it. I was more embarrassed, not because I lost the gift, but because it made me feel like I was irresponsible, that I couldn't even keep track of a dino plush. I was going to say, in our first year together, while we were in law school, I was really struggling with school and family life. I was contemplating quitting law school every single day. But my girlfriend was just the most encouraging, most supporting SO, so I held on for her. On my birthday that year, she gifted me a beautiful, expensive pen. She said it's the pen I'm going to use to sign my first document as a lawyer. I lost it while riding a motorcycle that same week. 6 years later, the first thing I did when I discovered I passed the bar was to buy an identical pen. My girlfriend was so happy and said she thought it was already lost because she hadn't seen it since she gave it to me. I told her that was impossible and used the fake gift pen in front of her when I signed my name on the BA. She still has no idea. This would be a pretty hilarious story to tell 10 years down the line. Story 8. One time I thought I locked my keys in the car. They were in my pocket. Yep, I figured it out halfway through, and by then I decided to die with this secret. Sometimes I detach the ignition key off my huge keychain to make it easier, and I peeked through the car, saw the keychain, and didn't even check my pockets, and just assumed I left all my keys in the locked car. Stupid. We had to walk 2 miles to her friend's job up a hill in super cold, windy as hell conditions, in like flip-flops and definitely not suitable clothing, and then we got a super awkward drive to her house from her friend. Then we had to drive 30 minutes to my house, get my spare keys, and go back and give the other dude some gas money. It took us like 2 hours, and we were both exhausted and wanting to go home at the start of it. And then I had, of course, to drive back and drop her off, and then get gas and then go home. LOL. Ha, this unlocked one for me. When I had just turned 16 in the year 2000, I was dating a girl right when I turned 16 and had driven 30 miles or so within a few weeks of getting my license. The dad finally said it was time to go at 9 p.m. or so, and I couldn't get the car to start. Just wouldn't even click. I dicked around with it and he looked at it and had no idea. After about 45 minutes of trying, he went inside to call a friend over, and I realized the shifter was basically just not all the way in park. It couldn't have been fully in neutral, but when I got in to try that last time, I pushed the shifter and it clicked, then started right up. I was too embarrassed to admit it was something so simple that I just never told anybody about it. Looking back, I literally had a driver's license for less than 2 weeks, and was an idiot. The dad probably would have thought it was funny, and that he should have thought of it. For some reason though, that was such a shameful thing to me. Reminds me of the time I went to a motorsports event with my dad. We went down in his car and camped for a couple of nights. On the second day, he couldn't find his keys, and realized he probably left them in the boot, which is self-locking. He got his then girlfriend to drive about 3 to 4 hours with the spare key, only to later realize that the original key was at the bottom of his sleeping bag. This is something that needs to be taken to the grave. Story 9. I saw on the call display that the jewelry store was calling. I let him answer it. He immediately left to run an errand and came home and took me out skating, where he romantically proposed on a frozen pond under a floodlight on a February evening. We'll be married 20 years this year. I can't tell him I knew the whole time. I just can't. We had gone a few weeks before to pick the ring out, and we had talked in depth about getting engaged. It wasn't a complete surprise, but he did want his proposal to be a surprise, and it really was. was special, even though I knew. My wife and I will celebrate our 13th anniversary this October, but we had talked at length about getting married, even about who we would invite and what food we wanted. We had also looked at rings. After she saw the one she knew she wanted, I went and bought it the following day from Jared's. Fortunately for me, I learned that it was on display from an independent jeweler store, so it was like one of a couple rings that Jared's didn't mass produce, which is an important detail that my wife didn't know. So I have the ring. I plan to propose at Disney's Beauty and the Beast, her all-time favorite Disney movie show in Orlando, which we are going to in a few weeks. She didn't know I bought the ring, and in the middle of the night she just randomly rolled over in bed and asked if I would marry her. Of course I said yes, but the woman stole every ounce of surprise. So the only thing I could do, which I did a few days later, was tell her that I went to buy the ring she fell in love with and told her it was gone and they didn't have a way to get me the exact same ring because it was imported from an independent jewelry store. In a stroke of luck, I showed her the website and it even said out of stock on it. I had bought the very last one. She was livid, and there was no jab or snide comment she didn't make for the following couple of weeks. I took a ton of crap over this, and I just let her do it and apologized profusely and asked if we could look at rings to find a similar ring or something just as lovely. She never did find that other ring. Finally, Disney came and we went to the Beauty and the Beast show. I had to go to the bathroom before the show started, talked to a couple of attendants explaining my plan, who allowed us backstage after the show for a meet and greet with Belle and the Beast and a backdrop of the castle. We went and she went to hug Belle, and with her back turned, I dropped to my knee and opened when she turned to look at me, proposed right then and there. After the gasp and yes, she's like, "Wait, is that the ring? But you said..." Then it dawned on her. She slapped my arm, called me a jerk, and then kissed the crap out of my face and probably teared up. It was totally worth all of it, and I'll never forget it. God, I love that woman. I found out too when my mom called asking me if I wanted him to propose with the heirloom ring she had, or did we have our own plans. Dad confirmed it was happening last summer when he called to let me know to keep an eye out for the package that was meant to arrive. I, at least, didn't know how or where he was going to do it, but was suspicious of why he was so adamant on a trip that we were taking that year. And the day of, when he suggested we take a picnic. He is not an outdoors person who sits in the grass and waits around. He was so proud of himself for keeping this a secret for a year and that he pulled it off, and was boasting to everyone that I was so surprised and that I had no idea, taking this to my deathbed, cause I like that he has a story to tell that he kept a secret for that long. Kind of makes me wonder how many of my secrets are actually secrets. Story 10. That I know about their emotional affair. I know what they said and how minuscule I feel in my day-to-day life. I read a post yesterday where a woman's partner persistently denied he was having an affair for years, even after the woman had video evidence of him and the other woman on a scooter kissing and hugging. His reaction was, "I don't understand. What? We're just friends. I promise blah blah blah." I got totally infuriated reading it. The guy was playing dumb rather than coming clean. Or he was so entrenched in his lie, or he was able to retroactively justify any of his actions. And why would anyone even want to stay with a person while having an affair? Why not just break up first? It speaks to an inability to face up to the challenge of difficult emotional conversations. It's worth thinking about the type of person who would go to such lengths just to avoid doing the right thing, but difficult thing. OP is avoiding this conversation, perhaps because they are gathering their strength to confront their partner. It's really the burden of the cheating party to do that labor of confessing and making amends. Usually, though, it happens that the cheated party ends up doing all of that work. Confrontation, bringing up and working through the emotions, propelling the conversation. It's exhausting, while the other party just wants to bury it and move on, and maybe even cannot understand why the cheated party wants to keep revisiting it. The perspectives are very lopsided. In reality, if a cheater truly wants to make amends, they need to take the reins and repair, be forthcoming, and take on the burden of all the work in order to demonstrate that they are truly sorry. After experiencing both emotional and physical affairs, in my opinion, I feel like emotional ones hit harder. That was one of the most difficult things I've ever been through and would never wish it upon anyone. That sounds absolutely painful. Story 11. I actually feel so much worse, mental illness, sometimes, than I let on. I am medicated and see a therapist, but it isn't always enough. He works so hard and has so much on his plate. I don't want him to feel bad because often there's nothing he can do about it. Same, but for me, it's more that I've had so many years of needing to hide my struggle because I didn't have a safe person in my life to share things with. I needed to keep my struggle hidden from my family because even though they love me, their support was incredibly unhelpful and always made things worse. And they are the cause of so many of my issues. So, now I have this amazing husband who is so gentle and accepting. He doesn't overreact or treat me any differently when I'm being a bit unhinged. He doesn't pry or need to know all of the details. He's just there, and his hugs make everything okay. It's been a real challenge to unlearn the need to hide things. It comes so naturally to me to hide things like having an appointment with my therapist, even though he knows I see a therapist and he's fine with it. Occasionally I tell him my trip to town is for some other reason. I've had to unlearn the need to hide my emotions. For me, telling him I feel sad today is a massive thing because it's so programmed into me to hide that stuff. Anyway, he's amazing and it's an ongoing journey. But yeah, I still hide stuff. As a husband to somebody who has bad anxiety, just let him know. Even if he can't do anything about it, my wife and I hadn't really sat down and talked about how bad her anxiety can be. My anxiety is the weight of the world crushing me type. Hers is brain spirals into the worst case what if scenarios type. I had a completely different reference point from my own experience of what anxiety was, and got a better understanding and appreciation of what she goes through on a daily basis. Yeah, I think letting them know is the best option. Story 12. I cheated on my ex. She was abusive to me, insulted me, screamed at me, scratched me, hit me, threw stuff at me, but I felt stuck. I reached out to a female friend of mine after an especially heavy argument where she threw an insulated bottle into my face, and she consoled me. One thing led to another, and we were intimate. After that, I felt dirty, but it also opened my eyes. It felt like the ties that kept me with my abusive ex were cut. I was able to break up with her and now found a girlfriend I wouldn't even think of cheating on. I also told that friend of mine about it, and how I wouldn't want to have that happen again, to which she said she felt like I needed to realize that there are others out there that'll give me the respect that I deserve. She was right, and she was happy that I finally found home. It's definitely a mixed feeling. I was in a similar situation. I was able to open up to another woman about what my ex was putting me through. She would tell me if she felt like I was wrong in certain situations, which I greatly respected, but I kept up with so much crap, including coming home to another guy being in the house with her, who I knew as her best friend, but I didn't exactly trust. He had admitted to having feelings in the past before, and they both lied about him just stopping by to use the bathroom on his way home from work. She forgot that my friend who lived with us at the time was still home in his room, with the door shut, and he was mad quiet. I asked him if he knew about the friend being over, and he said yeah, he's been here for a few hours now. He very rarely came by when I was home, which was an obvious red flag, and oh boy did my ex deflect and gaslight me. Every one of my close friends hated her, told me not to trust her, that she was changing me. I was eventually pushed over the edge after being threatened and spoken to like I was an idiot for the millionth time. I cheated and wanted to be caught. It felt good to get some positive attention for once. But going as far as having sex with another woman did make me feel incredibly guilty even during. I didn't like who I was at that point. Not only did I finally leave her, but I turned my life around for the better with someone I saw as a partner for life. Although she is aware of what I did, she knew my ex and me for a long time and was around all the drama. I can't and refuse to hide anything from her. Doesn't seem like it needs to remain hidden. Story 13. I knocked the TV off the IKEA collect shelf. I was walking quickly with the laundry basket half on my hip and knocked onto the shelf. The TV came tumbling down and landed upside down on some shoes. I guess the shoes cushioned the fall because the TV works perfectly fine. My husband has told me 1,000 times to slow down so I won't bump into things, which I do often. I will never tell him that the TV fell from 5 feet and it was totally my fault. I also accidentally popped a leg off of my mother-in-law's antique Queen Anne style vanity/dressing table. It has 7 other legs, and I wedged it back into place. No one knows or ever will. My brother bought us a TV. I didn't want one. I deliberately didn't own one, but he was being nice. It had a kind of crappy base, and I should have mounted it to the stand, but I didn't. A month after we got it, my 6-year-old daughter knocked it over when I was out of the room. She blamed the cat. It was too big, and she couldn't take the pressure of having broken our brand new TV. I just said, "Oh no, what a silly cat," but also explained it was my fault for not securing the TV better. I will never tell her that I knew it was her unless she confesses to me. She'll be 18 in a month. Maybe she'll tell me when I'm dying. My brother and I damaged an oil painting of my parents when playing a stupid game. We were 18 and 20-ish at the time. About 10 years later, my parents were downsizing and my mother was asking me to look through stuff that she was going to get rid of. I saw the painting and jokingly said something along the lines of, "Nah, I don't want that picture since me and my brother put a hole in it." I got a very terse, "What do you mean?" Needless to say, I now own that picture, although I think she might be storing it for me, as I had to leave the country. This is why I refuse to discuss even the general topic of my secrets. I'll just blurt it out. Story 14. My mother-in-law, 81, who lives with us, and is generally not too bad to be around, was complaining to me, my wife and son were at work, about how much noise our 2 grandgirls make in the house during the day. They were 5 and 7, are spending the summer with our son, who lives with us while he goes back to school after his divorce. This was day 3 of them being here. We have a 5-bedroom house and my mother-in-law occupies 2 rooms and a bathroom of her own. After multiple statements saying I need to discipline the girls and train them to be quiet, mother-in-law says, "I have never been able to stand children. As a teenager, I refused to babysit because I couldn't stand children. Now don't get me wrong, I love you, your son, my grandchildren, the dogs, and I even love my daughter, but I just can't stand being around children at all." She pauses for a few moments, looking at me expectantly. So I say, "The day will never arrive where I discipline or train these girls to be quiet for laughing and playing. The majority of the laughing and running you heard was because I was playing with them, tickling them, and chasing them. We live in Florida. By 10 a.m. it was 92 degrees and 74% humidity. It was absolutely nasty outside. The girls didn't want to be outside, the dogs didn't, and I didn't. Not only that, but by 2 p.m. the thunder and lightning started with heavy rain. So that particular day was spent inside watching movies, playing various games, and just outright being loud with imagination, laughter, and love." She looks shocked and angry and then says, "Don't get me wrong, as I said, I love you all, but that love should be from a distance. That's always been best for me because I'm set in my ways, and if I stay here, I will end up yelling at those girls and doing the discipline myself, since you and your son can't seem to do it properly or at all." I said, "You will never raise your voice or hand to them, period. You will find your 81-year-old ass in a nursing home or jail, so perhaps you should love from a distance and go live with your sister. I understand your sister can't stand being around you for more than a few days, but I'm sure it will at least be quiet." She has now moved in with her sister who lives 12 miles away. She has told my wife it's just until the girls go back to their mothers and at the end of the summer. I'll have to tell my wife a version of this, but not with even my daughter part. The thing is, my wife and BIL already know how their mother is, how she treated them as kids. But if I tell my wife she was an I even love, that was an afterthought, after the dogs were mentioned. Well, that's just not part of the story that I will ever repeat. Sounds like an absolute mess. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please feel free to stop by our channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.